So we're going to have a little chat today, a little fireside chat, and I have it on good authority that your energy is like up here, and it makes me happy because I thought I had high energy, but you're like super surpassing me, and this is coming from your colleagues. So we're going to have fun today. Tout prêt?
On est prêt, on est prêt.
Okay.
On est prêt.
Just for the audience, thank you all for being here with us today for this conversation with Minister Champagne. We are thrilled to be hosting him, and Courtney and I have known each other a long time, and this is a great thrill for us to be able to partner to do this event together here today. I will say that we'll be leaving room at the end of today, about 15 minutes at the end, for a Q&A from the audience. So as you're ruminating, as we have a conversation today, we will be throwing the mic to the floor for some brief questions here at the end. So let's get started and buckle in. Okay, so we're starting. It appears the federal government's focus for economic growth prioritizes investments in natural resources, defense, and trade diversification. Comment le Nouveau-Brunswick peut-il tirer le meilleur parti de ces trois secteurs?
Tout à fait. Mais d'abord, permettez-moi de vous dire merci d'être là aujourd'hui. C'est un grand privilège. And big round of applause to the men and women in uniform, because I just see we're in the fire station. So big round of applause to those who keep us safe and those... It's telling that we're in such a place. And thank you to the board of de l'aéroport de Moncton. Je sais qu'on est à Dieppe, mais c'est aussi l'aéroport Roméo LeBlanc. Donc, ça nous rappelle des souvenirs. Je veux d'abord commencer. Permettez-moi de saluer Ginette Petitpas-Taylor, ma collègue. Je pense qu'on est chez vous même. Merci d'être cette voix-là unique. Moi, je peux vous dire, avec Ginette, vous êtes bien représentés. Quand Ginette parle,
Absolument.
Les gens écoutent. J'ai eu le privilège de servir avec Ginette pendant des années. Je me rappellerai toujours du tintamarre qu'on a fait ensemble. Et honnêtement, on en a fait du bruit, on va continuer d'en faire. Ça, c'est sûr. Je veux prendre l'opportunité de remercier aussi mon collègue Dominic LeBlanc. Dominic, qui est une voix excessivement productive pour toute la région de l'Atlantique, le Nouveau-Brunswick. Dominic a un rôle extraordinaire. C'est un collègue d'exception qui a maintenant un des rôles les plus importants au sein du gouvernement canadien in terms of dealing with our partners south of the border to chart a way to negotiate the best possible deal for Canada. And to both of you, I want to say thank you. If I'm here today, it's not by accident, it's by choice. It's because you told me that there's opportunities and possibilities in that part of Canada which are unique. And je veux dire merci, on était à Shediac ce matin. Bon, on arrive de chez Shediac Lobster, justement avec la famille Maillet qui nous ont reçus, et avec la première ministre Holt qui était avec nous aussi. Puis ce matin, on était au Cap-Lumière pour rencontrer des pêcheurs, puis nous faire un peu l'état des lieux, pourquoi c'est important d'investir dans nos infrastructures, d'investir dans le Canada Atlantique. Alors, sur les trois choses que vous m'avez dit, moi, je pense que, premièrement, en matière de défense, toutes les entreprises canadiennes devraient avoir une stratégie défense. Moi, je pense qu'aujourd'hui, on est dans un monde où le secteur de la défense doit devenir un des piliers de l'économie canadienne. Je vous donne un exemple. Peut-être certains d'entre vous have seen that as the Minister of Finance to get new shoes. I got mine from Bullet Boots, the Western boots. And why I'm saying that, it's because it's very telling. Ça, c'est une entreprise familiale dans mon comté qui a commencé en 1945 avec 75 employés. Et maintenant, en plus des bottes de cow-boy, leur plus grosse division, c'est les souliers militaires. Pour les forces canadiennes, pour les agents de la GRC. Alors, je me dis, si vous avez une PME d'à peu près 75 ans avec 75 employés qui est capable de faire un virage vers, par exemple, le secteur de défense, moi, je vois des opportunités énormes, particulièrement ici, quand on parle Nouveau-Brunswick plus généralement, mais toute la question de la cybersécurité. On sait que la province s'est donné une force de frappe, j'allais dire, assez importante sur la question de la cybersécurité. Alors, certainement un des grands piliers. Un autre pilier, c'est toute la sécurité alimentaire. C'est sûr, quand on arrive de chez du Cap-Lumière, quand on arrive de Shediac avec nos collègues, toute la transformation alimentaire, c'est un enjeu hyper important aujourd'hui, je pense, dans le monde. The third thing I would say is energy security. And let me step back today. I think what we're seeing in the world is the speed, scope, and scale of change, which is quite unprecedented. It just feels that there's a lot of wind and windshield. It's geopolitics, it's geoeconomics, supply chain, it's quantum, AI, cyber. And if you go in the street, you know, for a lot of people, that translates into a loss of control. You go to the feeling of Canadians, and I then to travel like my colleagues across. I was in Winnipeg at the 27th Wing there recently, talking to people. I just feel like a loss of control. And when I was in Washington, just like Dominic Go, we were with, I was with the managing director of the International Monetary Fund. And she was comparing our world today in a world which is wrapped with the fog of uncertainty. And I think in that fog of uncertainty, we're a lighthouse. And you don't need to take it from me, but you can take it, for example, we were just last week, I was in Toronto, Montreal. I was with Fatih Birol, which some of you may know, which is the executive director of the International Energy Agency. And you think you and I have energy, you sit an hour with this guy, you say, I texted True because this is Chatham House with 5 cameras, so it's supposed to be an intimate discussion, which I will continue, but I texted the Prime Minister and I said, if you think I have energy, when you spend an hour with him, redesigning the energy ecosystem of the world, you see why Canada stands out. When you look, one thing we know is that geography doesn't tend to change much. People don't change that much either. And that will remain a choke point for decades to come. We're going to find a solution, but it is clear that we're going to face challenges. And in that new world, what we have to offer is stability, predictability, and opportunity. And I think, and I'll stop there, but just to say that why I'm such a believer in New Brunswick, why I'm such a believer in the entrepreneurship of this province, why I'm such a believer in all of you is that in a world where the nexus between food security, energy security, economic security, and national security is so close, you understand why Canada, why North America, why a province like New Brunswick, and like a city of Moncton can shine in this world where you put a lot of value more on resiliency. And that's what Dominic and colleagues were trying to do, is to reduce our dependency to become more resilient. And I think in that sense, being in that particular location, ici, quand on est à Moncton, c'est quand même exceptionnel au niveau de la situation géographique. On est proche de l'Europe, proche d'un marché qui va continuer. On pourra parler des États-Unis, j'imagine, ça va être une des questions. Dominique va pouvoir peut-être même en rajouter, mais moi, je regarde la situation géographique du Nouveau-Brunswick, je regarde la situation géographique du Canada Atlantique, je regarde la diversification des marchés, et je me dis, ici, on est au cœur de ce qu'on peut exporter à travers le monde. J'étais avec la première ministre Holt quand on était en Inde récemment, et je lui parlais tantôt, puis je me disais, the amazing products that I saw today is the kind of products that people want around the world. The maple leaf has never been so admired in the world. And you may say it might be the speech of the Prime Minister in Davos. Yes, sure, it was a game changer, and I can tell you behind the scene on that. But I think what is most amazing and we're seeing is the resiliency of the Canadian economy, the resiliency of Canadians. Canadians are resourceful. We are blessed with geography, we're blessed with resource. And despite the fog of uncertainty, despite all the challenges, despite the fact that obviously if you're in softwood lumber today, you don't feel exactly good. If you're in Moncton or in Fredericton or in the north of the province. If you're in my neck of the wood, for those of you who know, I come from a place also where you have a lot of softwood lumber. If you're in Hamilton in steel, you don't feel that good. If you're in Oshawa in the car industry, if you're in British Columbia. But overall, and I'll really finish there, if you compare the Canadian economy, and I promise you'll have more than one question.
Courtney and I are just like, okay.
I promise. But take it, you said I have a bit of energy. I have a bit of passion as well.
We like that.
And you cannot not be passionate when you're here. And you just finished with a family, 75 years, Dominic, 4th generation. You cannot feel not inspired by the people you meet here. But what I would say is that, just to finish, yes, there is challenges. Yes, there is fog. But I just want to give you a data point that a lot of people have not really appreciated. Canada is the second fastest growing economy in the G7. If you exclude the United States, we're growing twice as much as Germany. We're growing twice as much as Japan. We're growing twice as much as the United Kingdom. We're growing faster than France. We're growing 3 times Italy. Now, the reason why I say that is that sometimes as Canadians, and I go back to Fatih Birol, he said, I'm not sure we appreciate, the position we have relative to the state of the world. We're not immune to the challenges. We're not immune to a number of things that may be happening in the world that would have consequences, and we'll come to affordability, I'm sure, because that is really what people talk. If you and I were to talk a walk, which we're going to do in the airport, trust me, it takes quite, you walk with me today, you'll see how much it takes from the moment I check in to the moment I board. You'll see that I don't need any poster. Just walk with me in the airport and you get the feeling of people. And there's three things in the mind of people around affordability, which is obviously the cost of rent, the cost of food, and the cost of gas. And I'm sure we're going to come to that. So yes, on the trajectory of this country has never been, in my view, I'm more confident than ever. But the reality is that people are concerned about the end of the week and the end of the month. And how you do these two things together in a truly Canadian fashion is having a long-term vision, but also be there for Canadians where they are.
Thank you, Minister.
So thank you again for being here and for everyone coming. We've had a fantastic turnout, and it's our pleasure to host you here today. Yeah, as Kim mentioned, we're quickly shuffling our questions because you covered a lot there. I mean, if we run out, I did hear you went for a run this morning, and I'd be curious how far you went, but we can cover that if we need to. Big runner myself. So the question I'd like to ask, you mentioned there's a lot of wind on the windshield right now. I like that analogy. So businesses are navigating rising costs, labor shortages, shifting trade relationships, pressure to modernize, and all at the same time. And so from the federal government's perspective, what's the single biggest opportunity for growing communities like Greater Moncton over the next decade, and what needs to happen to unlock that?
Well, I'm a big believer. I come from rural Canada, so I'll start with that. There's a place in my heart for rural Canada in the sense that I come not, obviously, Moncton is much bigger than Shawinigan, there's no doubt about that, but I just say I have this connection. We were just saying, Dominic was introducing me today and said, this is not a guy who comes from like Bay Street or others. My reality is your reality, is the reality of communities, is the reality of small and medium-sized businesses, is a reality of people working extremely hard to get ahead. It's the reality of people who have done all the right things in their lives, have taken risks, and now are impacted by things they don't really control. And that is the challenge that you're facing. If you're an entrepreneur today, honestly, I have the utmost respect for each and every one of you who have taken risks, have created jobs, are supporting families. When I was at the plant today, I was just saying thank you. Look at me and said, you thank us? I said, yes, because I get it. You're living in an environment which, if just to give you a sense of perspective, because I think perspective helps us to appreciate where we are in the history of mankind. The International Monetary Fund published what they call the Uncertainty Index. And if you look at this index today, it's probably at the highest point since the Second World War. In terms of the world we have to navigate. It's like when I was doing the spring statement, someone said, okay, sir, you're a good fiscal manager, you restore fiscal discipline, lower deficit, but what about your projections? How confident are you? I said, I am, but I don't have a crystal ball. I mean, we come back from Washington, you come back from these trips, Dominic, as well, and you shake your head and you say, okay, what's going to be next? And Canada is not immune to this reality. So I just want to give kudos to the people who are here on the stage, but really the people here, the workers, the entrepreneurs, the risk taker in our society. We said, despite that, we're going to take some risk because we believe in a better future. We're not immune. I don't know what may happen south of the border next week or next month. But one thing I know is that you focus, people were telling me, and I'll come to your question recently. I was in Toronto and people were stopping me and saying, Minister, we want certainty. I said, I want certainty more than any one of you. But what is certainty today? What is the cost of certainty today? I'd say true certainty in the current environment is focusing on what you can control. Because the rest, to be honest, you don't know, I don't know. How long is the Middle East conflict is going to last? Is it going to expand? I was with the foremost experts in the world, and I was saying, what about the secondary impact? They said, what do you mean? I said, what about the unknown? Like now we're not allowing helium to go to the strait. Well, helium is key to produce semiconductors. So are we going to have a shortage? Who's checking that? Then you talk about food security. And you say, hold on, fertilizers are not crossing. So what's going to happen with food security for the Global South? And if this is impacting the Global South, what is that going to do to us? And for example, the price of food even here in Canada, because we import. So it's kind of these things which are piling on. So focusing back on what we can control, I think there's three things. First of all, we need to make sure that people, and we heard stories today, Dominic and I, about still interprovincial trade barriers. The federal government has done everything they could. Dominic has led the effort. Federal government has led by example, removing all the barriers. But we heard stories today that, to be honest, I was like, how is it when you want to sell to Quebec just next door? What about your products? And I said, well, it's still not that easy. And so for me, I mean, if you think about what's the opportunity when you're here, I'll talk about the macro and then come to clear issue. But we still have work to do on interprovincial trade barrier. It's work in progress. It's clearly not mission accomplished. We still have work to do. And I want, again, to say to the team that you're leading, Dominic, this is much needed. You know, when things are easy, you don't focus on these things. It's like in a family, you know, when you have a few inheritance, the house, this and that, but, you know, when things are going well, you don't really focus on these things. When the goings get tough, these things really matter. If we remove interprovincial trade barrier, you're talking about adding $220 billion to Canada's GDP. And I would put it to you, who can afford that? Who can afford that which country would allow that to happen? How can we afford that? That's within our control. Then you're talking about diversification. Premier Holt, we were in India, amazing visit. Amazing to see how people see Canada today. I've been minister for more than a decade, and I can tell you, rarely I've seen, there was a moment of pride. I have to bring you behind the scenes. So I'm sitting next to the Prime Minister, and we have the Prime Minister of India with us. A bilateral which lasted about 2 hours. I can tell you in the world of diplomacy, these things don't happen. Half an hour, 45 minutes, you know, Jeanette, an hour, but 2 hours and beyond is really, really rare. At some stage, the Prime Minister of India, you have to be humble, 1.4 billion people. And he looks at us and he starts quoting the speech of Prime Minister Carney in Davos. And honest to God, the Prime Minister turned over to me and like, yeah, that's pretty impressive. I mean, if you know, when is the last time that a Prime Minister of India has been quoting a Prime Minister of Canada's speech? I've not been to all the bilats, but I would think that you may have to go back to, I don't know, Pearson or some other era where, but it was just the symbol that Canada represents today and why diversification and why what you're doing. You know, it reminds me that if our best friends south of the border at some stage decide that they want less of what we have to offer, you look around the world and you just realize that, well, there's a lot of people who wants what we have to offer. And by the way, needs what we have to offer. So if I come back to Moncton region, the first thing is around food security and processing. And you cannot not be impressed when you leave here. I mean, if you are, I don't know who you are. But you have to be impressed when you leave Moncton. Not just because of the airport and the people, but when you realize, and the chamber.
Thank you. I was going to correct you there.
Yeah, I saw a smile there. I saw a smile there, and I saw eyes there, and I said, "Oh, it might be something that I said." You know, did I said Dieppe as well? Yes, I did all the key words. So I have to be mindful. Travel the country, you know. But I just want to say you have to be in. For most of us, not you, but for most of us in the rest of the country, I don't think we realize the economic importance of what you harvest. We were talking about natural resources, and I was thinking about seafood and fisheries, and what a natural resources we have and what we have been able to do, 65,000. I mean, I was looking at some of the numbers as the contribution to the economy, and it's amazing. But you know what I like the most, and that would go to your heart, is that someone said, it's good, sir, what we do, but we cannot just take it and ship it. And that reminds me where I come from. Trust me, because in my neck of the wood, in front of my house, there's a river. My grandfathers and before, they used to cut log and just drop it in the river to send that to the mill to the United States. Today, we're smarter. And someone said, sir, yes, we need to pick it up from the ocean. Well, let's do the first, second, and third transformation here, because that's where the value. That gave me faith. That gave me hope, because people realize that We have the natural resources, but we have the smart people to transform that. And honestly, when you go to the Shadiac Lobster Shop, you could see they were showing us packages even of value-added products to Japan. This line is the U.S. And that element of innovation, you know, they were... Honestly, you go to these plants and it's humbling as well. The amount of innovation and what you see. Technology. And you were asking me, what have you done for us lately? I would say that, in a way, that's how I interpret it.
Did I say that?
No, but, you know, it's a bit like question period. I always say, hope you have good questions for my answers. But that's at question period when we have to answer these questions sometime. But what I want to say is, for example, the productivity super deduction. That is an immediate boost to every single business in the country. Why? Because you can immediately expense if you're buying a building, if you're investing in technology, if you're investing in innovation, if you're investing in your own equipment. And I think that is something which is precious. And by the way, I just want to say, because we're so close to the United States, à peu près 90% à peu près, je regarde Ginette, des exportations du Nouveau-Brunswick vont vers les États-Unis. Mais il y a une chose qu'on ne réalise pas toujours, c'est que, par exemple, something which is perhaps technical for many, but what you call the marginal effective tax rate, which is how you compare a new investment on that side of the border to the other, you may not have realized, but Canada is the cheapest place to invest from a tax perspective of any G7 country. Actually, I'm 3% lower than the United States. And I know it's going to sound... I was with the CEO of one of the largest companies in the world, and he said, sir, I didn't even realize that. I said, if you do a new business investment here, your marginal effective tax rate is actually lower than the United States of America. This is how Canada has become competitive when you add the different things that we've been doing. The second thing, and I'll stop there, is about energy security. I'm a big fan of what, you know, you have hydro, you also have nuclear. And I was chatting in the car with Dominic on my way, but I was thinking, you know what? At the time where the world is looking for energy, first you have the largest refinery in Canada, in New Brunswick, in St. John. At the time where the world is redesigning its energy system, both renewable, conventional, and nuclear, isn't that a place for New Brunswick to shine? The world, I mean, oftentimes people have said in the past that demography is destiny. And you look at countries which have grown, it's linked to demography. I would put it to you that energy is destiny. In the world of electrification, energy is a game changer. And I come from a province where I was young, people thought it was infinite. And today, just your province next to you, there's a number of projects that are not going because there's just not enough energy. And the fact that you can produce renewable energy here or even invest, you know, we'll be the first G7 country with a small modular reactor in the G7, ahead of the United States. We'll be the first country in the G7. I think this is a huge opportunity because when I go back to the energy security piece, the food security, the location of this province, and the innovative aspect that you have been able to develop. Like I said, if 90% of your trade, of the trade here is currently with the United States, I can just imagine when we open up to the world, what we can achieve for people here in New Brunswick. So that's why I'm very, very confident because we have the people, we have the industries, we have the critical minerals. Think about tungsten and what we've put in the major project office. By the way, tungsten, defense, this is all related. We have the energy, and we're the only G7 country with a free trade agreement with all the other G7 nations. You will never hear me talk about Canada, a country of 40 million people. Never. When I'm abroad, I always say Canada gives you access to 1.5 billion consumers in the fastest growing market in the world. Asia Pacific, Malaysia, soon Indonesia, Singapore, Japan, growth country, Vietnam. You go to Europe, we are the only country not physically located in Europe which has free market access to Europe in the way we have. So we have like the 27 countries of Europe, And thanks to I would say the strategy that Canada has adopted, we still have 85% of our trade that goes south of the border under the CUSMA exemption at the lowest tariff rate in the world. We don't shout it, but that is the reality that we have achieved. And I go back to the point, what is certainty today? I think Canada has been smart to act, to engage, and if you look at the outcome, I think that our approach has been strategic. And like I said, there are sectors where you'd say, yes, sir, but this is not good enough. I'm with you. We're fighting every day. Workers, industry, support. But at the same time, if you look on the overarching trade environment today, you compare it to our European partner, G7 partner, others, you would say Canada is still in a fairly good position. Now, everyone would say we used to have almost a virtual border. I'm not sure. This is the world probably of yesterday. So we need to find an arrangement. We're working on that. Obviously, Dominic is leading the effort with the Prime Minister. But at the same time, I say let's focus on what we can control, because the best way to, comme on dit chez nous, être maître chez nous, c'est de focaliser sur ce qu'on est capable de contrôler. And that's why I'm hopeful, because here you have the talent, you have the resources, you have the location, you have the market, and I would say you have the will. Because when I meet the entrepreneur here, it's always go, 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 yes, 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 what can we do?
And I would say, yes, Minister, that's actually, yes, a round of applause. Thank you. Look.
To all of you.
And that's what we're hearing from our business community, the uncertainty. I think this, the first year of the tariff south of the border, people were a little bit hesitant, and now people are just saying, we're going to go with what we know, because uncertainty, we can't let that paralyze our business. So as we're moving into the spring economic statement, you announced a couple of new initiatives, including support for training 80,000 to 100,000 more people in the trades. We have many of our members here today in that space. That is certainly welcome news for our region, where studies show we're facing a significant labor gap in the construction and trade sectors here in our region. How exactly will this support flow to the regions?
Well, this is a game changer. This is a generational investment. This is not the incremental that you always see government do. And I think you can trust on this Prime Minister, you can trust on this cabinet. I would suggest you can trust on this Finance Minister to do what's right. In a sense that we realize that when you're in times like we are, incremental change is not the answer. You cannot just incremental because the world is not going incremental. You feel it. I feel it. It's not incremental. When you say the world is, people compare the period we have now to after 1945. Some compare that to the fall of the Berlin Wall. We were with the president of Finland, and he said, look at the history of mankind. You always have these periods, we had the Second World War, then you have an interim period, then you have the Cold War, but the interim is always very turbulent. And I think we are in this kind of turbulence phase, where before you have a new kind of order, if you want to say, you always have these period of turbulence where people are trying to redefine what is going to happen. So the best way for us is to build like never before, at speed and scale like we've never seen. And I must say, we probably somehow have been a bit complacent as a nation. We were close to the United States. We had a favorable exchange rate, access to a very, very deep market, the biggest market in the world. And I feel that now it's the time to put a number of these things right, The investment, the $1 billion we're doing in Small Craft Harbor, it's the right thing to do because it's the DNA of communities. It's part of who we are here in New Brunswick. But again, this is also a big economic investment because you just look at the outcome. If you just want to look at a return on investment, you would see that this is and trust me, I have a boss who is pretty big on return on investment. And if there's an advice, everyone says, how is the relationship between you two? I said, if you want one piece of advice, always be nice to your friends. They may become your boss. So that's the basic thing I always say. I was 20 years in Europe. We knew each other from then, but always be nice. But I would say with respect to that, this is a game changer. Because if we want to build this country at the speed and scale that we want, we need the people. We need to inspire the next generation. We need to have the red seals the 80 to 100,000. And we've seen across the country, not unique to New Brunswick, not unique to, well, in Manitoba was interesting. They said, it's not that we're lacking the people, we're lacking the infrastructure. So obviously it varies from one region to the other, but broadly speaking, we just need to have the next generation to come and build with us, making sure that we have the carpenter, the electrician, the people who are going to build this country. Because I would put it to you, you know, to give you an example, when we were preparing Budget 2025, I inspired myself with the German infrastructure plan. Why? Because Germany is, you know, largest economy in Europe, only country with a AAA credit rating with us, very large population. So I started looking and you know, the IMF said there's only 2 countries in the world we can afford to use fiscal capacity. It's Germany and Canada. They didn't say 10 countries. They didn't say 5. They said 2 in the G7. They said Canada and Germany. But they say if they use that smartly to invest in housing, infrastructure, productivity, innovation, in our case, defense, they say they'll see growth. Interestingly, if you look at our program, we have the largest infrastructure investment of the G7. Germany is 500 billion over 12 years. Canada on a cash basis is 450 billion Canadian over 5. When you adjust for currency, we're the largest infrastructure plan in the G7. So obviously when you do that and you say this is our North Star, you need to build. But to build, you need people. And to inspire the next generation to build with that, you need to have a program. So I think this was a moment where we look at the number of programs that existed, and trust me, my colleagues would know, when you sit at these cabinet committee, and I start asking, how many programs do we have? You'd be surprised. Then I say, name them to me. I ask the officials. Now everyone's looking at their phone, looking down. And I said, in how many departments? And I said, you're pretending that I'm a young guy or young girl in Shediac, Moncton, or Fredericton, and I'm supposed to navigate through this. I'm supposed to open my computer and, by the way, know that you have a piece there, maybe here, maybe there. Maybe you qualified there, or you could look right or left. I said, why don't with the Prime Minister and the clerk, we said, let's have a stream, something like a concierge services. We're going to take young people by the end almost. We're going to supplement their income. We're going to find them a place to get trained, whether as part of the armed forces or whether in colleges, in schools. And we're going to make sure that they have an opportunity for a job. And I think this for me is a catalyst, because building for building, you could say, okay, that's great, you're doing that. But beyond that, there's a national unity thing. There's something about building a country together, which is also part of the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And I'm just going to make the link, because this was linked when the Prime Minister and I, we look and we said, Canada was one of the very few countries, well, in the category of countries who can afford it. We were one, you know, the Nordic countries have done it, some in the Middle East, but we said, what about having an intergenerational wealth creation vehicle? That you can have your own sovereign wealth fund, that we can invest in these projects of national interest. You know, you're going to build stuff, and you've seen in some countries, in Nordic countries, it's been fairly profitable. But in a truly unique Canadian way, I was very pleased when Bloomberg said, this is so Canadian. They create the first sovereign wealth fund in Canada, but it's going to be the only sovereign wealth fund where retail investor can invest. And that for me is so quintessential Canadian, because for you and I, and perhaps most people who are watching at home, unless you're a qualified investor, you won't be able to invest in the mine of tungsten. Well, you could buy a fund in mining, or you could, but you know, if you're going to build this country the way we want to do it, if you want people to have a piece of the action, even a few, you know, a little bit of saving, and say, I'm going to be part of that. I'm going to own part of it. This is my country. This is what we're building. If you look at these two things together and the investment in communities we're doing, you start seeing that all of that makes sense. You know, we're building for communities. It's going to be built by people in the communities, and people will be able to even have a piece of the action and say, you know what, that infrastructure that is building, I'm partly owner of that. And I'm, as the same time you create collective wealth, you'll have a feel of you know, everyone can get a piece of the action. And I thought this was truly Canadian in how we did that.
Okay, we are I love that, like, Courtney Ann had all these questions prepared, and you answered a lot of them. I think we were thinking alike here. That's what I'm thinking, right, Courtney?
Absolutely.
We're going to toss it out to the audience now, because we have a little bit of time for some questions, and Dominic is at the back. She's got the mic. So the rules are as follows.
I'm far more inspired that it's the Dominic at the back than the Dominic at the front.
Yeah.
Because I was a bit nervous about that.
So
segue,
yes,
yes.
Yes.
But if it's the Dominic in the back, I'm all fine, No problem, Dominic, we like you.
Well, we love the Dominic at the front.
Yes.
Because we're in a small region, we know him well, so we're going to throw it to the Dominic at the back. If you can just raise your hand, your name, who you represent in 30 seconds or less. Questions? I know we're going to John Wishart.
And whatever you want. You could go anywhere. We're family. We can talk about whatever.
Give him the hard questions. Here we go.
Thank you, Kim, and welcome, Minister. My question relates, and you just referred to the Canada Strong Sovereign Fund. Could you tell us a little bit more about how business leaders like those in the room can play a role in developing the fund? And related to that, and this is maybe the harder part of the question, we're on airport land today, and there's been a little bit of chatter federally about the federal government potentially selling airports to raise funds to invest. I'm sure Courtney would be interested in that answer.
Would love to hear this.
Courtney is recording that answer to play it back. Well, first of all, thank you. Thanks for asking. I'll start with the last part and I'll come to the first part. What we said basically is that I think in this country we have to modernize our thinking in the way that governments, in my case federal government, have been building, maintaining, and operating assets. You're looking at other countries in the world, which share the same values. You look at Australia, you look at the UK, you look at other, and there is somehow a way to say, well, not most, I would say the vast majority of infrastructure in this country has been funded by taxpayers. Because when you look at the government, I reminded someone in radio this morning, I said, well, you may see me as the government, but the government is you, me, and everyone watching and every one of you. It's like we have used taxpayers' money to build these assets. Now, you're saying we're in 2026. There's a lot of interest in Canada. Canada is one of the few countries which provide that long-term stability, predictability. We were just in Australia, the supers. I was just with one of the investors yesterday and say, how can we help communities to build more? Think about the mine in Tungsten, for example. The kind of things that it's not just the mine, it's the community. So the premise is that can we just have a national discussion about how we modernize our approach to that? Other people have looked at different assets and how you get the best value to taxpayers so that you get more value to them and better services. So that's kind of the premise that you say, do we need taxpayers to own every piece of infrastructure in the country? And some countries have looked at and say there might be other way or more efficient way to use that, whilst, for example, taking that and, to your point, transferring that asset, for example, in the fund and freeing that capital to invest in other things so we have more. The point is that someone was asking me, is this about less, for example, airports? I said, no, this is about more, not less. Is that if you free up capital, then we can redeploy it in other spheres, whether it's healthcare or other things that Canadians would want, to support that. So that's the first thing. And that's why we say, let's have a conversation. And to be honest, not every asset is the same. Not every asset would be suitable, for example, to have private partners. Some maybe. And by the way, I'll tell you a secret in front of all the cameras. I'll tell you a secret, that already exists. If you go to, I don't know here in Moncton, but if you go to, for example, Montreal and Pearson, those who operate the parking lot, those who operate the shops and the restaurants are concession, they're private businesses. So parts of the airports are already supported by people who want to look at best practices around the world and doing that. So that's kind of the premise. What we said is that let's have a discussion. Let's look at that. Is there a better way to do it? Different way to do looking at partners around the world. And I think in the context of, there's a limit to what taxpayers can finance, I would think, with the speed and scale we want to do.
Could we have co-investors with us to do that whilst you maintain or even improve the service to people? By the way, if you were to look at some of these assets around the world, and you would ask Canadians who have traveled through them, because you mentioned airport, I'm sure you would find that different models don't usually yield some or equal or better outcome to people. You know, the experience of the traveler, for example, is either equal or better, depending on which place you're looking. And by the way, our pension funds, your pension money is used in many parts of the world to exactly have these kind of assets. So the point is that if they're doing it abroad, could they do it at home? Maybe. I mean, they're doing it already. So that's the kind of that part of the question. With respect to the Sovereign Wealth Fund, we're going to be consulting, because it's interesting. When we finish, we had the announcement, the Prime Minister and I, 8 hours before the spring statement. We provided more detail, and then I was on TV. She said, well, we have so many more questions. I said, it's okay. It's normal. We announced it 8 hours ago. We were not pretending that we would have all the answers with respect to the retail investors, because I want to make it easy and accessible. We're going to consult some of the best in the financial industry and others to say, what is the liquidity, how you protect the capital, how do you help people to get into that? Because if we did not do the retail piece, as you might appreciate, it would be much faster and somewhat easier. But we didn't do it because it was easy. We did it because it was meaningful for people to say, I could be part of it. Now, it requires more design. And by the way, we're blessed, because you may know that the clerk of the Privy Council used to run one of these things. The Prime Minister, one would suggest, as some experience on that. We have consulted broadly. So we're going to be coming back to you, generally speaking, in terms of the design aspect of it, so that it is, you know, it's interesting, just to tell you, it's also the news cycle today. I tried to do an interview 8 hours after, and I won't tell you which anchor, and I said, be great if we could talk. He said, oh, sir, we already talked about that. I said, but this was like 8 hours ago. He said, yes, but we've moved on. I was like, well, it's like you do that once in a lifetime. It's not like, I appreciate that. But if you think we've already exhausted the topic, I feel this is
news. It's old news.
Yeah, I was like, well, I appreciate things go fast, but it's like, you know, countries do that once in their history. I'm not even aware of a country which has, well, different versions, but you don't have like that many. So just to tell you that, yes, there will be more. Yes, we'll talk about it. But yes, we want to make sure that everyone can be part of that journey and invest in Canadian companies. So you remember, there's two things. One, we said it's project of national interest. And the other thing is Canadian businesses, because we need scale. And you live next to the United States. And that has been part of our challenges, is that for growth, a lot of our best and brightest oftentimes have migrated south because of the size of the market. Now, some have been staying here, you would know, and sell there. But sadly, we have seen too many, especially in the tech space, which have migrated south. By the way, we were the first country in the world which had an AI national strategy. We were the first country in the world with a quantum national strategy. We have two people, one of which won a Nobel Prize for his work on AI. Some people would suggest we invented AI. But some other people south of the border commercialize it, probably in a way that you would know some of the outcome today. So part of that was, how can you use that pool of capital as well to say, how can we support these national champion, if you want to call them this way, and say, how can we support them in a way that will build the champion here, and they will sell to the rest of the world, and the profits will come back here, and we will, in this way, make sure that Canadian companies and Canadian technology and Canadian IP stay in our country.
Okay, so
we have time for a few others, no? No? Well, I'm because I saw the gentleman, I didn't want to be rude because he's taller than me.
Doug, we have time for one more question. Doug Robertson, hello.
Hello, Kim. Thank you. Mr. Champagne, thank you so much for being here, and Dominic and Jeanette, and for your leadership and your government's leadership. Gives all a sense of Canada strong, so thank you very much for that. You talked a bit about tech talent. I run a tech organization here in the Moncton area. Among other things, we run an incubation program. there's been a lot of changes to the immigration programs and intakes in the last couple of years. That hits a little extra hard here in the region. Today, I've got 30 startups in our incubator. 75% of the founders are newcomer founders. And with that comes a higher order, I think, of risk-taking and entrepreneurship because they're here to build a new future. So I guess my question is, what is the government considering in terms of helping regions like ours? I mean, we're trying to double down on the retention piece. We've got to keep that talent here. We are losing some of that international talent. We had been doing a pretty good job in terms of retention. What's the government thinking in terms of helping regions like ours with the tech talent retention piece?
Non, merci. C'est une question, je pense que c'est une belle façon éventuellement de conclure notre discussion, mais discussion très importante, une question sur la question de l'immigration. And I want to give kudos to all my colleagues in Atlantic Canada, and particularly Jeanette and Dominic, and we were with Premier Holt for lunch as well, and our colleagues from Cabinet. And the issue of immigration was raised because clearly the reality here in New Brunswick is different than other parts of the country. You know, what we've been trying to do is, and I say it very openly and frankly, is that in other parts of the country, I always say when you let someone in, it's kind of a social contract where they can find a place to live, they can find a place for their kids to go to school, and if they become sick, they can go to a hospital. I mean, there's kind of, if you welcome someone in your country, you have to be able to offer kind of basic services that you would expect from any nation if you decide to go there. I think we were a bit out of balance in many parts of the country. And that's the challenge when you have regional employment markets like Canada. Because the reality, again, I come from a smaller community. So smaller communities, very different than large urban centers. And the reality is very, very different here in Moncton, because I've heard it in other parts of New Brunswick, than, you know, even the province next door, which happened where I live. So the reality there was different in the sense that you had this influx, and we needed to bring that to a more sustainable level. Just that there's balance between what you can and you know, the infrastructure that you have in order to accommodate these people who enrich and come here. Now, what we've been doing, and I would say this is something that I'm sure Jeanette, Dominic, and my other colleagues will continue to raise in Ottawa with me and the Prime Minister and others, is the reality of different regions of the country and how you adjust for it. We already did that in a way. I appreciate that some would suggest that it's good, some would say it's not good enough, some would say it's too much. Never easy when you look at a national basis like that and you're trying to adjust for very different realities in different parts of the country. But I think your message, which is well understood and heard, is to say, can we have we did that already, but can we enhance that system where in places where you would have almost full employment and in places where you need these people, particularly those which were coming here as temporary foreign workers, and we all know some of them in our communities. Some of them have kids which are going now to high school. So in a sense, they're not very much anymore temporary. They become part of the fabric of our communities. I'm sure you have people here, and I know some. So we've been trying to find a way to be fair, to accommodate the reality of different parts. You know, it's mainly urban and rural, by the way. It's not really like maybe more pronounced in Atlantic Canada, but it's oftentimes rural.
It definitely is. And just on that note, to support Doug, we've been long advocating for this at the chamber level with our 1,000 members. As Jeanette knows, we've been chatting about this quite often. We have 136,000 New Brunswickers set to leave the job force in the next 10 years, and only 60% will be replaced by those that are living here. So that's a huge issue and a reality that we are facing, that our members, our business owners are concerned with. So we've been advocating strong on behalf of Atlantic Canada. So whatever announcement you'd like to make, you're always welcome to come back.
Jeez. With a smile like that, it's difficult to... I got the message. Listen, as we're coming to... I just want to say, Well, first of all, thank you for welcoming me to both of you to the
Anytime.
chamber.
We
And-
appreciate your energy, like top notch.
Well, listen, I was with people who have a lot of energy on the panel as well. So, first from the chamber, and thank you to the airport. I'm a regular, so I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
I'm grateful. But to each and every one of you, I just want to say thank you. And you'd say, why would you thank us? Well, first of all, thank you because you took an hour of your time during the week, and I'm sure you could have done other things. And I'm also grateful because sometimes I think people look at the people on stage or the Prime Minister or colleagues which are elected official. But this is a moment for each and every one of us. I often wake up, I said that to the Premier when we were in India, I think. I said, there's very few people waking up in the morning thinking about Canada. You know, honestly. You know, and so we need each and every one of us to be the ambassador. Sometimes I'd like to say I'm the bragger-in-chief of Canada. I just brag about Canada all the time. Why? Because we have an amazing story. Now, not to say that everything is easy. Not to say that if you go in the street, people will talk to you about affordability. And I get that, and we've been acting. By the way, we said for the grocery benefit on the 5th of June, people will have a boost. Then they'll have a bridge to, you know, by the time that the economy picks up, we've reduced the price. We suspended the excise tax on fuel. So we get it. 2/3 of the additional revenue, and I was saying that to Dominic, former finance minister, I said, when I look at the revenue we had, 2/3 of that went back to people, both in terms of the housing we supported the province, the fuel tax, and the grocery benefit. So we are very much attuned. But the moment we live today in the world requires each and every Canadian, whether you're a business entrepreneur, whether you're presenting the Chamber of Commerce, whether you're the executive at the airport, whether you're a student, a worker, a fisher, I really believe that our story needs to be told. And we need to go out and say with humility, but also with confidence and purpose. You know, it's okay to be humble, but it's also okay to be confident and ambitious. You know, people, you know, I'll leave you with that. Last week I was asked, sir, if you had a magic stick and you could legislate whatever you want in Parliament, what would that be? I said, raise the level of ambition of the nation. But I don't know that you could ever legislate that. This is who we are. But I think in the world, which is, again, going back to the wrap of the fog of uncertainty, and you know something about fog here, we are really much this lighthouse in the world, with our values, with our people, with what we have to offer. So I would just leave it to you and say, let's seize the moment, let's be ambitious, and yes, let's build Canada strong together. There's never been a better time to be Canadian. Let's do it together. Merci.
Thank you very much, Minister Champagne. Confidence, absolutely, and ambitious are the key themes. Thank you for spending time with us today. Thank you to our presenting sponsors, Deloitte, to our friends at the Greater Moncton Romeo LeBlanc International Airport, our friends at M5 The Agency, Global Public Affairs, Sonic Image, Bob Lee Productions, Cheers Beverage Room and Catering, and Atlantic Decor. And most of all, thank you to all of you for being here today. We certainly appreciate your attendance. There's lots of food at the back, so please help yourself on the way out. Merci beaucoup.
Merci tout le monde. Bonne journée. À bientôt. Merci.
Avez-vous besoin du blanc? Vous êtes déjà correct? Non, tout fait. Oui.
Tu baisses ta caméra peut-être?
Je vais essayer de... Si vous voulez que je me mette, moi, j'ai pas de problème. Là, j'essaie de m'ajuster avec moi.
Ouais.
Tout est là. Ah oui, c'est ça. Écoutez, je vais dire 2-3 petits mots, puis après ça, on prend la question. D'abord... Oui. D'abord, merci de m'accueillir. Content d'être ici avec la Chambre de commerce de Moncton. On a eu une excellente discussion avec les partenaires économiques de la région. Comme j'ai dit ce matin, on a commencé, on est allé au Cap Lumière pour parler évidemment de l'investissement générationnel dans les ports pour les petits bateaux. On parle d'1 milliard, donc c'est 3 fois plus que ce qu'on faisait historiquement. Vous étiez là avec nous ce matin. Vous avez vu l'investissement important qu'on a fait. Ensuite de ça, on est allé du côté de Shediac rencontrer la première ministre Holt avec évidemment le ministre LeBlanc pour discuter des enjeux importants pour le Nouveau-Brunswick. On a parlé de la sécurité alimentaire, on a parlé de la sécurité énergétique, comment le Nouveau-Brunswick peut jouer un rôle dans cette situation-là mondiale. On a parlé de la diversification des marchés. On a parlé aussi de ce que le Nouveau-Brunswick a besoin. La première ministre m'a parlé évidemment de la question de l'immigration, des investissements en infrastructures, des investissements qu'on a fait, des infrastructures de santé. Puis évidemment, avec le ministre LeBlanc, bien, on va continuer d'appuyer les entrepreneurs de la région. Je pense que dans le dernier budget, les gens ont vu qu'on était des gestionnaires responsables des finances publiques, mais en même temps qu'on était conscient de la réalité des gens, qui est vraiment autour de l'abordabilité, donc l'enjeu du coût du logement, de la nourriture et évidemment de l'essence. Alors, on va continuer d'avoir un plan qui nous amène à bâtir un Canada fort, mais en même temps s'occuper des préoccupations des gens dans le quotidien. So, I just want to say thank you to everyone. Great to be here in Dieppe at the Romeo LeBlanc Airport with my colleague, obviously Minister LeBlanc. A great day today. We started at Cap Lumière to talk about the generational investment in small craft harbors. This is something that Atlantic Canada has been asking us for a long time, and now we're tripling the investments on a yearly basis to build these small craft harbors. They are the ADN of the DNA of many communities across the nation, and we saw that with fishers, and we can see the pride in people and say, give us the tools, give us the means of our ambition, because that's a huge economic driver for the province of New Brunswick. We then went to Shediac to be at the lobster processing plant, Shediac Lobster Shop, and it was fascinating for me and I would say Minister LeBlanc to see the level of innovation, automation, and the economic impact that this industry in particular has in New Brunswick would justify the investment we're doing in infrastructure. But we talked also with the Premier. Premier Holt was with us about the market diversification. We talked about the role that New Brunswick can play in terms of the energy landscape that is being redesigned in the world. We talk about issues that matters to her about immigration, and we talk also about interprovincial barriers that Minister LeBlanc obviously is leading in our trade with the United States. So I would say overall a very good day and very, very hopeful and confident when it comes to the role that New Brunswick and Atlantic Canada can play in building a strong Canada. So very, very glad to be here today.
Monsieur Champagne, peut-être en français pour commencer, les ports pour les petits bateaux que vous avez annoncés, est-ce que c'est pour tout le monde, pour tous les ports? Est-ce qu'ils doivent postuler pour avoir l'argent? Et vous avez parlé de l'importance historique. Pouvez-vous me rappeler un peu aussi?
Bien, écoutez, historiquement, puis le ministre LeBlanc qui était ministre des Pêches va peut-être pouvoir ajouter, mais historiquement, dans les dernières années, les investissements dans les ports pour les petits bateaux étaient autour de 90 millions de dollars. Là, on met près d'1 milliard de dollars sur 5 ans, donc c'est 200 millions de dollars environ additionnels, plus le 90 que vous aviez déjà. Donc, vous êtes environ à 290 millions, près de 300 millions par année. C'est là où je dis on triple, dans le fond, la somme qui est investie dans les ports pour les petits bateaux. Pourquoi? Parce que ça fait partie de... Quand on veut bâtir un Canada fort, bien évidemment, dans nos communautés côtières, ces infrastructures-là sont essentielles non seulement pour la vitalité de la communauté, mais aussi c'est des moteurs économiques. C'est un investissement important pour permettre... On voyait par exemple l'industrie de la pêche au homard, une industrie très importante avec des marchés d'exportation, les États-Unis, le Japon, l'Europe. Alors, pour moi, c'est ça, je disais, c'est un investissement historique. C'est vraiment, ça répond à un besoin dans le Canada Atlantique. Ça fait longtemps qu'on nous dit, donnez-nous des outils de développement économique pour l'Atlantique. Et ça, je pense que c'en est un qui est centré. C'est pour ça que je pense que ce budget-là, cette annonce économique-là, ça parle aux gens de l'Atlantique, parce que ça, c'était une de leurs grandes demandes.
Dernière question, si vous permettez. Donc, est-ce que c'est pour tout le monde? Est-ce que les ports doivent postuler pour avoir ça? Comment ça fonctionne?
Bien, la ministre des Pêches, puis peut-être le ministre LeBlanc, je vais lui laisser faire un complément de réponse, mais la ministre des Pêches va déterminer. Il y a déjà un programme qui est en place. Vous savez, on sait déjà des infrastructures qui sont critiques. On sait celles qui ont besoin de travaux imminents et même importants. Celui qu'on a vu à Cap-Lumière, c'était quand même un des ports, justement. Ça fait partie de ceux-là qui auront besoin d'un investissement direct très rapidement. Et le ministre LeBlanc, évidemment, est très au fait, comme ancien ministre des Pêches. Je pense qu'on a une bonne idée de ce qu'on doit faire ici au Nouveau-Brunswick et dans l'Atlantique. Je ne sais pas si tu veux rajouter.
She's in a rush,
Sorry.
Okay. Is there an agreement between the federal government and Alberta
Well, I would leave that. I'm here in Moncton today. I would leave that to the Prime Minister to speak with respect to the discussion he has with the Premier of Alberta.
Do you know when there might be any news on that?
So again, I think it's Prime Minister is obviously very much engaged in the negotiation with Alberta. The Premier of Alberta was in Ottawa recently. I think the Prime Minister would certainly have the latest update when it comes to the MOU between Alberta and Canada.
And is your government willing to use money from the Sovereign Wealth Fund to pay to build a new pipeline to BC's West Coast?
Listen, I don't think we're there yet. In a sense, we have to create the Sovereign Wealth Fund. What we said is that we're going to look at different assets. I'm not going to include or exclude anything for now. We just need to look at the different assets. We talked about a number of federal assets that would be in the best interest of Canadians. We talked about, for example, a number of airports, for example, that we should modernize our thinking around that not every public infrastructure in the country needs to be funded by taxpayers, but there might be a way to extract the full value of these assets for Canadians, reinvest and provide better services. So I would say we should have an open mind as to what the fund is going to do. And by the way, what we say is that the fund is going to invest in projects of national interest in Canadian company, but it's going to be arm's length from the government. So once the structure is in place, they will have their own board, their own governance, and it's going to be arm's length. They will decide what provides best value for their investment in Canadians.
One of the things that's really on the minds, I believe, of all Canadians is inflation. The food, the fuel, electricity costs, all those things. What can we do to make things more manageable for the average family?
Well, I'd say thank you, and I would say, I said it before, that's the first thing I think when I wake up. If you ask me what you think when you wake up in the morning is affordability. That's top of mind for people. They're very concerned about the end of the week, the end of the month, and that's where it's three things. It's affordable housing, it's grocery, and it's gas. With respect to affordable housing, I would say we have probably the most ambitious plan to build more affordable homes, because that's the first pillar of affordability. If you can find a place that you can afford, which is safe, that's where you don't have to take so much of your disposable income, or a disproportionate amount to find an affordable home. With respect to grocery, we understood, we've seen since COVID, which is getting relief to people in the summer at the time where we know that particular year there's a lot of travel coming to this part of the country, and we thought we needed to support Canadians. I'll tell you, from the $7 billion of additional revenue we highlighted in the spring economic statement, 2/3 of that went back to Canadians, because this is who we are as a country. Canadians understand the long-term vision to build more growth in the country, to build a stronger Canada, but they're also saying, well, help me now. I get it, I get you want to have more people in the trades. I get it, you're going to create a sovereign fund that's going to provide growth and wealth, collective wealth for generations, but these measures on affordability are really what people care about today, and that's why we are very cognizant that it's the end of the week and the end of the month. And if you look at the G7, we're probably one which has been really out there to support Canadians at a time of need.
Take one last question.
Could I get a question? Mr. Champagne, on airport privatization, a lot of people have expressed concern that passenger fees will go up and even that working conditions could be eroded. How do you respond?
Well, I would say it's premature. What we've just said is that we're going to look at a number of federal assets. We're going to get the information, get the data, analyze. Like I said, we mentioned one type of assets, airport, but there are many other assets. And by the way, not all airports would be suitable, for example, to have private partners. So we need to do the work, we need to do the due diligence. And the whole purpose beyond that is to do more, provide better services to Canadians, and allow public assets being built in this country, managed and operate, not just through taxpayer money, but there might be other ways to do, like they've done in other countries like Australia and the United Kingdom. So we're going to consult, we're going to listen to people, we're going to look at what makes sense. With the objective in mind is to offer better services, modernize the way we are approaching public asset in the country so that we can have more, that taxpayer money can be deployed in probably a more productive way to support other priorities that Canadians have in a time like this.
If I may, just one more. There was a resolution passed at the Liberal Party convention by someone from here in Moncton, Dieppe, for a maritime passenger rail corridor. So there was a resolution that was adopted by the Liberal Party convention in favor of this passenger railway corridor. Are you considering this?
I may leave maybe Minister LeBlanc to add to that, to be honest, about the corridor that he's talking about.
So the details, again, that would be a good question to ask the Transport Minister, who's actually from Prince Edward Island. I know that the government is investing billions of dollars in modernizing both the locomotives and the cars that Via Rail will use on those corridors, for example, from Halifax to Montreal or from Montreal out west. There's a lot of work being done on modernizing the equipment that Via Rail, frankly, has needed for a long time. I don't think we'd be modernizing that equipment for Via Rail if we plan to reduce the service.
Juste en français pour M. Leblanc, pour les ports, vous disiez que M. Leblanc, peut-être que vous avez plus de détails. Est-ce que c'est pour tous les ports ou est-ce qu'ils vont devoir, les autorités portuaires, postuler pour avoir accès à l'argent?
Ben, c'est un chemin, malheureusement, que les autorités portuaires connaissent bien. Chaque année, ils soumettent des demandes à Pêche des Océans. Il n'y a jamais assez d'argent. Souvent, les fonctionnaires de Pêche des Océans arrivent et disent « Ah ben, peut-être l'année prochaine, on n'a pas de fonds cette année. » Mais la bonne nouvelle, c'est que maintenant, ils ont 3 fois l'argent qu'ils avaient l'année passée. Alors, on va dire oui 3 fois plus souvent que l'année passée. Moi, j'ai aucun doute, les pêcheurs savent exactement qui appeler à Tracadie ou à Moncton ou à Charlottetown ou à Gaspé pour aller trouver l'argent. Puis la bonne nouvelle, c'est que François-Philippe a triplé le montant disponible. On était à Cap-Lumière aujourd'hui. On a dit oui à Cap-Lumière. On va aller à Richibouctou bientôt. On va dire oui à Richibouctou. Puis on va continuer le long de la côte de l'Est du Nouveau-Brunswick avec ces bonnes nouvelles. Alors, c'est pas un nouveau chemin. C'est un chemin que les autorités portuaires connaissent bien. Mais au lieu d'avoir des excuses ou des raisons pourquoi c'est pas possible cette année ou le budget est épuisé ou il y a une autre priorité à côté, mais on va leur donner des bonnes nouvelles et très vite.
Mais ça, c'est pour l'Atlantique, cet argent-là? C'est seulement pour l'Atlantique?
Ben, pour l'ensemble du
Non,
pays,
c'est pour l'ensemble du pays.
La côte pacifique aussi.
Mais proportionnellement. Puis il y a toutes sortes de critères, Michel, qui vont l'impact économique des ports de mer. C'est quoi la valeur des produits qui sont débarqués. Toi, tu viens de Caraquette, tu connais l'importance du quai à Caraquette. C'est des centaines de millions de dollars de produits qui sont débarqués à Caraquette. C'est pourquoi Caraquette, Michel, sera toujours une priorité pour le gouvernement. Juste utiliser un exemple, par exemple.
Merci.
Okay, bye.